Right then folks, so one of the most important things other than actually catching fish, getting your presentation right, is the priming of the swims. Now what you'll see me do, I'm going to start off long. I always start off long, whether that's long on the pole, little ledger bomb or waggler, whatever. Always start off away from where you think your main swim's going to be. Now for me, even though it's proper cold and desperate, my main swim is going to be my loose fed line on that slope, as I touched upon before. Don't want to be fishing that for blooming heck, folks. Matches, it might be like 3 hours before you even try it. And what you've got to do, you'll hear like the phrase priming. Well, what's priming? It doesn't mean get some paint out and prime your walls and that, folks, before you put the actual paint on. Priming the swim is where you're going to be feeding, an element of feed going in, whether you're putting ground bait in or loose feeding in this case, getting them fish there, getting them interested in, but not going in too early and risk spooking them. You want to make sure when you go there, hopefully there's going to be fish or two waiting for you. Now, as with all these videos, folks, we fast forward everything for you today. So when I do go on, I'm going to give it a quick sort of 3 or 4 minutes out long, and then I'm going to come short and see what's happening, because there's been a feed going in for about an hour short. Now I've been fishing for a bit, and it's blooming desperate, as you can imagine, folks. Now what I have done is I've put a little babby pot on, yeah, just a little tiny toss pot on for out long. I've not put any more ground bait in, because I wanted to introduce a little bit of feed element in there, just to draw some fish in, but I don't want to catapult. Because of the wind and how it is, that bait's going to be going over too big an area, and I don't want to, not that I think it'll happen, I don't want them fish coming off the bottom. So by putting a pot on, it's zoning them fish in, centralising them, and it's worked. I've had a couple of nice hybrids and a little babby perch, so happy that we haven't blanked. But priming is the main one. Now what you'll see me do every sort of 3 to 5 minutes, pick up sort of 6 to 10 casters, and I'm going to throw them in on my short line. Now I'm not overly bothered about accuracy. As I say, I want to make sure that I'm getting that bait going in and drawing fish in, hopefully. So because it's cold, I'm just going to go straight on with a single maggot. Pinkies, that's why I've got pinkies as well though, folks, yeah. Single maggot though, and I'm just going to put sort of like hardly any maggots in, sort of like a dozen maggots in that pot, and just a few pinkies, sort of like 8 or 10 pinkies as well. Make sure there's no rubbish on your hook. Now just before I go out, I'm just going to put some casters in. That short swim again there. Again, priming. Now obviously the other swim that we're fishing, this long line, we're introducing bait now, as I say, so just going to go a little bit further out than where my marker is, just to allow for that pole pot, and then bring that back. Now what we can do, obviously, to keep bites coming is, you know, there's lots of ways you can sort of lay your rig in, getting that perfect presentation. We can try laying it out to the side, because what's happening today is the actual toe is going with the wind. Even though the wind's sort of off my back, it's blowing me float like away into the, and away into the right, if you like. All my fish have been, say all my fish, I've not had that many, folks. They've been, as it's been towing through, I've not had anything static, which is what you'd expect really, because your bait is acting in the most natural way possible. Yeah, it's not the top. We had a little dink then. It's not the top skim of the water. The actual whole water's moving out there. So just experiment with what you're doing with that rig. Yeah, flick it out, hold a tight line. See if it's, you know, the fish are a little bit further past. Lay it to the side. Either side will do. Or little movements as well. You know, little tiny 4 or 5 inch movements on your float, lifting it up and dropping it back down. The main thing is though, just to sort of search your peg really, but it's all about getting that bait in, certainly on that short line, not loads, so I'm not feeding loads, certainly no more than like 10 casters at a time, but it's just getting everything in that nice sort of time frame, if you like. Don't really want to let 5 minutes, I'm going to say, go by without sort of feeding something. And you know what I'm like, I said 3 to 5 minutes, but it's probably going to be nearer sort of 90 seconds to 2 minutes or something. So I'm not going to wait long out here before I come back and try that short line. I haven't tried it yet, so hopefully there's going to be a fish or two waiting on it. So I'm just going to put some more casters in, get that primed. Them casters are probably, they're in the area. They're not going exactly where I want them to, but I'm not bothered about that. When I've got my rig in place, I've got something that I can physically aim at. So that's where the accuracy is going to come into play. Out there at the minute, I'm just letting that float sort of drift through. Give it a tiny little movement. All these things you've got to experiment with to try and, you know, keep your bites coming. Certainly I won't bother with the likes of going lighter than your 0.10. Smaller hooks, 18s is fine, 0.10's fine on commercials. It will be, you know, something to do with like your rig that'll be the problem. So just as long as you're fishing fine, lighter hooks, that'll be perfectly fine. But yeah, experiment with flicking your rig out, little lifts and drops. You know, obviously with that pot that I put on, that's really zoning, you know, that baiting and avoiding like the loose feed element, which will, you know, ultimately spread your bait out too much. I've not put any more ground bait in. If they were coming to that, you know, ground bait proper would have had bites sort of over it straight away. It's that blooming cold, folks. I can't tell you how cold it is. And you know, this is what it's all about when it's cold. It's all about trying as best you can to, you know, sort of get bites and doing the best you can. And that's where, you know, the priming comes into it even more so, which is what we're on about. Yeah, your main swim, you must leave it and prime it. So I'm just going to lift that float. It's drifted about a metre from my marker, that float now, folks. We've not had a bite, so I'm just going to lift it up, drag it back, and I'll give it this last sort of run through, if you like. And I'm going to come back and try that short line. So I'm right excited. Whether we'll get a bite on it or not, it's one of them. One thing I can assure you though is you will get bites on it. You know, usually sort of much later on into the session, when that light starts to go, you know, sort of 2 o'clock onwards, if you like. No matter how cold it is, the fish will always tend to have a little bit of a feed then. And usually the swim wave you've left alone for the longest, or you primed it for the longest, if you like, that's generally where you end up catching most of your fish. So I'm just going to give it this last sort of run through. See, it's pointless when that wind's like that trying to hold back against it, because all it's going to do is just going to blow your rig around too much. So just let that float or that rig act nice and natural, and just let it go through as it wants to with that toe. So what I'll be tempted to do, match conditions, would be put another little bit of ground bait in, but come off that line now, give it a bit of a rest, and then you're doing the reverse. Excuse me. So what you'd be doing once you come on the short line, which I'm going to do now, you'd go and prime the long swim up. So the next time you went back on it, hopefully there'll be a fish or two waiting for you, which is what I want to do now, because we need to go and see if there's anything on the short line. So what I'm going to do just before I go on to it is feed it. So we've primed our short line, and what we're going to do now is prime the long swim. So I'm not going to hardly put any bait in this time, just literally half a pot. I'm going to put a few maggots in, a few pinkies, that's it. Half a pot. Just give it a light squeeze, that ground bait, that's all we're doing, that's all we're putting in out there, because it might be that we need to get back on it within sort of, you know, 10, 15 minutes or so. So we've gone from priming that short swim, and now got my marker, we're priming that long swim. So 3 sections off. Hopefully it's going to go straight away, but the way it's been out there, there's every chance it might not as well, but we'll give it a go. Now what I always like to do as well, so feeding casters, is try a maggot first on the hook. Simply because everything swim is going to eat casters as well, but they'll lightly hoodies that will take a maggot quicker or more so than they will a caster. So maggot on, I'm going to flick this out away from me, so it's coming down in a straight line. Bring that pole back. I'm going to hold a nice tight line, so it's going to fall through really slow, this rig. Now obviously with that element of loose feed, I'm expecting the fish to be, you know, not off the bottom and up in the water, but certainly getting bites anywhere from sort of now, if you like. That's where I'm expecting to get bites. Maybe not, you know, obviously straight away, but certainly later on into the session, then that's when you're gonna, you know, be getting the bites a lot quicker. Now one thing I don't really like to do so much on slopes is what I will do out on a flat bottom is lift and drop. I'll give it a little bit of movement, I suppose, but I much prefer to lift the whole rig out and lay it in again rather than lift and drop. It will work, don't get me wrong, you know, fish love to sort of chase that bait, but with it being on a slope, I like that rig to come back natural onto the shelf, so I'm not going to leave it that long, you know, sort of 40 seconds to a minute, that's all I'm leaving it before I lift the whole rig out, flick it out, hold a tight line and let it come back and rest on that shelf again. And it's just experimenting like that, folks. Usually once you go on this line you get bites straight away, but as I said, we're fast forwarding everything for you. Once you've, like, as I said, primed it for a good 2, 3, sometimes even 4 hours, this can be the line that you do most of your damage on. Certainly match conditions. When that light starts to go and the fish get confident, the fact that you've been loose feeding, so you're drawing lots of fish in, it can be phenomenal. You can basically go from not catching anything to pretty much winning a match. You know what I mean? It can be that good sometimes. It really can. All the bites you'd expect to come sort of like now, as it's falling through that bottom third. That's when you're expecting to get them. Come on, the fishies. Oh, we had a little dink then, folks. We had a little dink then. Again, just as it hit the bottom, just had a little bit of an indication. I'm more than happy that these aren't sort of fish through the water, so we definitely don't need to get shallow kicks out. Not a chance. That would have been literally followed it down. As soon as it got down to the bottom, we had that little dink. I've not much toe there, to be fair. Yeah, you see, I've got my back shots just to the left of that float, but if I let all resistance go, it's not moving through nowhere near as much as what it is out long, and that's why you can get away with using obviously much lighter floats, and just everything looks as natural as possible for them lovely fishes. So yeah, so it's not quite happened this time, unfortunately, folks, but I guarantee getting that priming element into and incorporating it into your fishing, it's just phenomenal. And this short line, when they rock up on this short line, it's just brilliant. What you've got to do is be strict on yourself, though. You know, it might be sort of over the course of a match, you might try it after an hour, hour and a half, like we have done today, not had a bite on it. You've got to keep that feed going in. You might try it again after like half an hour, 45 minutes or something. Again, not get a bite on it. Keep that feed going in, and then I guarantee at some point in the day, them fish will rock up, especially when you've got a depth like we've got now. But you've just got to be strict on yourself and keep on with that feeding. Not loads, I don't mean like, you know, double feeding, sort of 20, 30, 40 casters or maggots. Just little amounts, just keep that bait going in. And usually when you get to that sort of like time of day when them light levels go, that's where you can really put some fish together. So, but for me, as it is at the minute, folks, I'm going to come back and I'm going to try out long again, hopefully snare a few, and then I reckon another maybe hour's time, them fish will have rocked up on that short line and I'll be snarled up in great big roaches. Wish me luck, folks.